Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking you through the pros and cons of becoming a social worker versus becoming a therapist or a counselor. So if this interests you at all, please stick around because my opinions might surprise you. And I'm just going to be basing this video off of some research I've done about social work and also my own experience as a LPC, a licensed professional counselor who works in private practice as a therapist. So if you're wondering why I'm comparing these two things, do you know that social workers can do talk therapy? I bet you didn't. So you do need to have a master's in social work before you can do that. The beautiful thing about social work is that it also exists as a bachelor's degree. Unlike clinical counseling, most of us have undergrad degrees in psychology, but you don't have to have an undergrad degree in psychology to pursue higher education to become a licensed professional counselor. So the reason I want to compare and contrast these two different degree programs is because when you are thinking about what you want to do in the mental health sphere, you're faced with a lot of acronyms, a lot of confusion, a lot of people saying different things. When I was going into the field, I knew nothing. I didn't know that social workers could do therapy. I didn't know that social work was even an option. I didn't know marriage and family therapy was an option. I really just found the clinical mental health program and went with it, which, look at me now, I'm very happy with my choice, and I'm so glad that my ignorance didn't, have me make a bad decision for myself. I'm very lucky in that way. But I think a lot of people are looking to the internet to clarify some of these confusing terms, confusing acronyms, just confusion in general about our field. So stick around if you're interested in finding out what the pros and cons of being a social worker look like. And I'm just comparing this to my experience being a therapist in the field. Hi, my name's Alyssa Powers, and I created this YouTube channel to teach you the things that grad school didn't so you can thrive as a mental health professional. So I'm going to start off with just telling you some basic acronyms, as I like to do, because this will get really confusing if I don't. And also, if you are finding this video because you're doing research about the social work or therapy fields, then you're going to see some of these acronyms and you're just going to want to know this. So what I am a licensed professional counselor with a supervision asterisk at the end of my license. So LPC, LPCC, and lpcc-s are the stages. So you go to be pre-licensed, independently licensed, and then a supervisor, if you want to be a supervisor. Not everyone wants to do that. And then social workers, so you can get your bachelor's actually in social work, which is different than the therapy, the clinical mental health field, because most of us have undergrad degrees in psychology, but you don't have to. Like my undergrad degree is a bachelor's in education, and that was fine. But in the social work field, you can get a bachelor's of social work, which is so amazing. And then when you get your master's, you become a licensed social worker. So that's like the LPC equivalent. And then you can become an licensed independent social worker, and then same thing with the supervision asterisk at the end of that. So it's very similar in how it works. It looks like you start out after your master's as an LSW, and then you get your 3,000 hours and probably take a test, I'm assuming, and then you become independent. And if you are looking to work in private practice, you can contract with insurances. So that's a little bit about how it works, and hopefully I haven't lost you yet. So some of the major pros of the social work field. The first thing is that the social work field is just more developed. It's older, it's been around longer, and it's more established than the therapy field. It's been around since the 1920s and maybe even prior to that. This is just what Google has told me, but I knew that it was the oldest field because it was created, I knew, to just help, people get services that they needed. So something else that is so wonderful about social work is that you can practice social work in so many different environments. So social workers can work in hospitals, schools, nonprofits, private practices, agencies. They can do casework. They can do talk therapy. They can do all kinds of resourcing. That's amazing. That gives you a lot of flexibility, because what I hear again and again is that people in the clinical mental health field burn out, and then they want to switch career paths, and they feel that they have to completely do something completely different. And I think social work gives you a little bit more wiggle room, where you could have two social workers in two different environments that are doing very different things. So I think that is a huge pro. Now, I do think that, and I have heard from my friends that are social workers, that doing case management, which is usually an entry-level social work job that you could do with just your bachelor's, and that a lot of people do starting out, that is really taxing. It has really, really high burnout rates, and is just not something that most people want to sustain long term. If you're a social worker who's been a caseworker, comment down below your experience. I would love to hear about it, and if you think that this is true or not from your own experience. But just keeping that in mind, that casework isn't easy, and I don't think social work is for the faint of heart. So another pro of social work is that it's good at looking at systemic issues. So from what I have researched, it seems like social work does a really good job of looking at communities and whole issues. And then social workers are known to be really well resourced. So knowing the resources of the community, connecting people with those resources, and helping them actually stay accountable to then going out and getting those resources. I think that is a wonderful thing that honestly therapists aren't taught quite as much. And then I think another huge pro about how social work works is that getting a bachelor's degree in social work and then going into your master's, one, can really shorten the length of time that you are getting your master's, because you can go through an accelerated program that it looks like you can get your master's in social work after only a year if you have the bachelor's. If not, then it is a little bit longer and more similar to clinical mental health counseling programs. But I think that's lovely that you can get all of that extra time, actually focusing specifically on social work, the thing you want to do. Whereas psychology is a little more broad. Psychology undergrads are setting you up for some of the things that becoming a therapist is going to teach you, but honestly, a lot of it you don't need to know. It's just more broad because people with psychology undergrads are going on to maybe be psychologists, maybe be therapists, maybe, go and get their doctorate, whatever. There's a lot of paths that you can take. So I think it's wonderful that this undergrad degree in actual social work exists, but you cannot be a therapist with just your bachelor's, from my understanding. Actually, I know that to be true because you have to be a licensed social worker. So my last thing that I think is a huge pro of being a social worker is that you can get through school quicker with the same outcome. So you get your bachelor's, and then if you do a accelerated master's, that's much shorter than getting your bachelor's and then doing a 3-year master's degree program. So just throwing that out there, that's how that works, and it is so different. Now, things that are cons about becoming a social worker that you might not have thought about that I just want to throw out there. So if you are going to become a social worker, and you know specifically you want to do talk therapy, like you want to be a therapist, you want to sit in the chair, you want to have a private practice or whatever, maybe you want to work at an agency, I think that you will overall get less training on how to do that because social work is more broad. So if you're specifically knowing that you want to be a therapist, I think that the social work route might just give you a lot of content in your classes that maybe you're not going to be as interested in, because you are going to be learning a lot of other things on top of how to use therapy skills. And then another thing that I think is probably the number one con is that there's huge burnout in the social work field, because I think similar to how we view teachers a lot of times, like we want teachers to just solve every educational problem that exists. I feel like social workers are kind of looked at like that in society, like, oh, well, we need a social worker to come and fix this. But like, usually by the time a social worker is involved, problems are systemic, problems are deep rooted, right? So it's just something to think about. I think the burnout in the field is huge, and the burnout in the therapist field, LPC field, is also huge. So it's not just unique to social workers, but I think that it could be, like, especially if you're doing case management or people who work for the courts or working with sex offenders or pedophiles, just some of this stuff is like really dark and hard. And of course, as therapists, we also encounter that, but just saying that that's something to think about. So it's not for the weak of heart. I wrote that down. And then the last thing that I think you need to just be cognizant of is that once you choose social work, you will need to be supervised by another social worker. So that's not a huge con, I guess, but just if you want to go into private practice, for instance, and you want to get your 3,000 hours, you're going to need a supervisor that's also a social worker to okay you on those hours. So you need to make sure there are going to be other social workers wherever you end up wanting to work. So those are all the pros and cons. I have kind of been reminiscing and thinking like, okay, if I could do it again, would I have gone to school for social work? And honestly, I think I might. I love what I'm doing now, but I kind of love the idea of just having a broader scope on things. And I think I would have loved, so like I said, my bachelor's was in education. I didn't love those classes, and I think I would have loved getting a bachelor's in social work, and then maybe I still would have gone on to get my LPC and go to a clinical mental health program. I don't know if I would have gotten a master's in social work, but honestly, I guess at that point, then you only have a year to do an accelerated program. Yeah, I kind of think I would. It's a hard decision. And if you want to do talk therapy, which I did, I knew I wanted to have a private practice. I knew I wanted to do talk therapy. So no, I guess it's hard to say. In hindsight's 2020, I've worked so hard for this degree and I already have it. So I'm happy with it. In private practice, ultimately, if anything, I needed an undergrad degree in business to do private practice. But I'm so curious on your take on this. If you are a social worker and you're watching, or a therapist and you know social workers and you work alongside them, I'd love to hear what you think the pros and cons of the field are. And if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. It helps my channel so much. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.